Hello and a very warm welcome to Bharata First. You're watching Big Picture with Frank Rausen Pereira. Since you're here, I would like to thank you for your continued support. For those of you who haven't already subscribed, please like the video, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and then all notifications. Do follow our social media handles for all the latest updates, and you can also subscribe to our newsletter to get some incisive content. The Bharata First team is running a daily quiz. The winner will get to interview me in a program called Hot Seat that airs at 6 p.m. on Saturdays. Details are in the description of this video. Here are the UPI IDs for those who would like to come forward and contribute. They are also in the description of the video. A small contribution you make will be a giant leap for us to keep bringing you this content. So do continue to show your love and support. Let's get on with the discussion now, where the Reserve Bank of India on Friday asked card companies American Express and Diners Club International not to get new domestic customers on board from May 1st, as they did not adhere to the guidelines on local data storage. These entities have been found non-compliant with the directions on storage of payment system data, the RBI said in a notification on its website. This local data storage obligation is similar to the one proposed under the Personal Data Privacy Bill, which were objected to by MNCs. In this edition of Big Picture, we will analyze the Personal Data Privacy Bill. Joining me on the program today are Aishwarya Bhati, Additional Solicitor General of India, J. Sai Deepak, Advocate of the Supreme Court, and Jitin Jain, Cyber Technology Expert. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of Big Picture. Aishwarya Bhati, let me start the program with you first. Let's first try and understand and analyze the key features of the Data Protection Bill.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Frank Ji. The bill that is currently being debated and considered by the expert committee, all the stakeholders consultations are going on. This bill is actually a fallout of the Puttaswamy judgment, the privacy judgment, where the Supreme Court highlighted the requirement of having a data protection regime because the earlier regime that we had was arising out of the Information Technology Act and the rules, and obviously it was not really sufficient. It was not adding up or catching up with what was really required, and privacy having been declared as a fundamental right by the Supreme Court, it required a new regime. Justice Sri Krishna, his commission has worked on it, and now the stakeholders consultations, like I mentioned. The important key points in the bill are specifically, this is specific to the individual data. So privacy is really the focus here. And privacy not just from the aspect of e-commerce and that aspect of things, but also from the aspect of harnessing data, because we have seen that the age that we live in, information technology and artificial intelligence really thrives on open source data. We are all accustomed to it. We are all consumers of it, and we have somewhere, that blur is there with regard to protecting individual data. But I must also say that, while the focus here is on the privacy and balancing it out with the allowing the current regime to go on with accountability. So there is provision for, the fiduciary data collector to have responsibility to the regime that they are going to, of course, right now it's only a bill. They are still, it's still at stages before it is formulated as an act. But it is similar to the best practices in the world, in the sense that the European Union, of course, has a regime, and that regime is something that is emulated. California has enacted a law. Everywhere the focus is on privacy, the consumer's right to know what kind of data can be harnessed, the accountability of the fiduciary collector. There is some provisions for the governments, on some reasons to get a leeway out of it, or a bylane out of it in specific circumstances, which is similar to the provisos which are there in most of our fundamental rights, national security, etc. But I think important aspect of it is very similar. I found it to be very similar to the manner in which the world is dealing with the data protection laws. Everyone had something similar to what the archaic information technology rules that we had. But 2020 and 2021 has seen the world relooking at its data protection regime in a completely renewed manner. So I think it's about time that India also does it in the same semblance. And I don't think this will be the last we hear of it, because this field is changing so fast that we will continue to require to upgrade ourselves to keep up with the changing times.
Absolutely. Jitin Jain, let me bring you to the picture now. Let's analyze this aspect as well. The MNCs are against this bill. What is it that they are fundamentally against, and why are they against the bill?
Frank, because your shows are known to have fierce and very frank opinions, so I'll tell you the exact reason. You see, who is opposing the bill? Are software associations like NASSCOM and DSCI. Who is DSCI? It is a subsidiary or a subsidiary body of NASSCOM. What is NASSCOM? Industry association. Who funds NASSCOM? 80% of funding comes from Microsoft, Google, and other MNCs, American MNCs mostly. Now, if in this country where data is becoming the new oil and you're looking at a 40,000 crores of additional revenue, if the data is localized in India, the new data centers will have to be set up. You will have to pay or take consents of users in case you're trying to commercialize the data and sell the data. So you're looking at a 40,000 crores approximate of industry. And then the larger issues of data sovereignty as well as the data jurisdiction. So in an age where data is used for commercial purposes, for generating money, it is also used for espionage and intelligence. So you very well know that all big techs across the world, be it in China, America, they have had great relationships with the security and intelligence community. Now, in the countries which have had advantage across the world because the hosting and servers or the commercial hub data centers which are located in the West, now they do not want to do away with that advantage. Whichever country will rule the data centers or technologies like 5G will rule the intelligence world for next 50 years. So the fundamental thing is not about money. It is something much beyond money, that you do not want to cede your control to other countries. You do not want to decentralize the control. You do not want this feeling of nationalism to come in other countries where they say that my data is my jurisdiction, my right, my money. It is West which wants to So now what they are doing, because they're controlling all the software associations, they're funding all the software events, they're funding all the conferences. If you name several conferences which are organized by associations like FICCI, NASSCOM, majority of the sponsors are Huawei from China or these big companies from US. So you do not expect them to speak against these companies. So अब हुआ क्या है, ये लोग जिस थाली का खा रहे हैं, जिस देश का खा रहे हैं, आज उसी को गाली दे रहे हैं. And that is why associations like DSCI and NASSCOM are fiercely opposing this data localization policy. And also to an extent that, you see, you are also destroying your own national interest. This bill primarily look at three things. A, the data principals will be the prime owners of data. The data fiduciary will be sort of, you will collect only for a specific purpose, and beyond that purpose, you are only a custodian of data. Without the explicit consent, you can't share the data. If you do, there are penalties on your turnovers which are in place. Second, these companies never invested in security of customers in India. Everybody got hacked. So Facebook gets hacked, Google gets hacked. You see class action suits in US. They end up paying hundreds and billions of dollars in penalties and settlements, and it is settled. But when it comes to India, they don't pay even a single penny because we are treated like third-rate citizens. Now, here in this bill also, it says that whether the data is leaked intentionally or it is hacked because of your lack of security or for whatever purpose, you will be held responsible and you will pay an amount to a tune of 2% or 3% for your global turnover. So that is the problem these companies are facing. Third, see, if the data resides in India, this whole problem of sending MLATs and running away behind this US and UK will stop. The data will be in India, we will be able to access. Third, the biggest intelligence today is the financial intelligence. With one of the biggest software and smartphone economy, which is in India today, you are looking at robust society growing in online transactions. So that sort of data, that who is buying what, at what quantum, will generate so much of financial intelligence for precision advertising, for sales, for insurances, that every country, every big company would want to have a pie of that. So this policy will do away with all that, and they'll say the data of Indian users, the transactional data, will stay in India. And that is the problem WhatsApp was facing, Google Pay was facing, that they want to keep all that data in US, not in India. So
Sure.
the stringent trend of RB and government is ensuring that India will not only become the owner of its own data, we will exercise our sovereign rights, we will defend our jurisdictions, we will defend our ownership of data. And this is the whole game, beyond
Absolutely.
money and beyond this thing.
So, Sai Deepak, let me bring you in. So clearly, the MNCs and those who store the data abroad are not going to let this go without a fight. In such a kind of a situation, what is our best option? Lost connectivity. Sai, are you there? Let me take the discussion forward and try and address this particular aspect as well. Aishwarya, let me take this up with you. How do we address this difficult situation? Because the points pointed out by Jitin Jain right now, clearly the situation looks very difficult, and the MNCs are going to put up a tough and a brave fight. How do we deal with such a kind of a situation?
Well, having a regulatory mechanism and a regime is the only way to deal with it. India is not a country that anybody can shut its doors to or shut its eyes to. We are a huge market. And the number of data that we are going to be the youngest country for the next 30, 40 years. The number of internet users, the number of data users, etc., is huge. So a regulatory mechanism, Jitinji spoke about WhatsApp Pay and Google Pay. Eventually, they had to. So there is no really option for them. They have to keep the transactions here. And that is the only way to go about it. This is absolutely imperative because while we have huge numbers and huge markets, we also have a little bit of a problem where our as a nation, our understanding of digital spaces, barring some experts, is very, very nascent. So we are mindlessly, going on apps and I agree. I mean, without even realizing that in the world that we live in today, we are if we are not paying for something, then we are really the consumer. And it's not really commerce all about. I mean, now the internet medium, the social media has the potential to change opinions. We saw their interference in the political mights of the largest democracies, huge democracies in the world, mighty democracies of the world, the manner in which espionage he already highlighted. So regulatory mechanism is the only way to go about it. And, when Australia asked Google to pay for the news, Google, the headline that Google said was that we are going to pull out of Australia. It was a boogie. Australian Prime Minister, the next reaction he said was that Australia does not react to these kind of threats. And what happened? They fell in line. They had this, agreement in European Union, but they were resisting Australia. So a position has come, a place has come that these multinational companies, they feel that they're so big that they can actually challenge and threaten sovereign countries. That is a real problem, and that is why it is important for these regulatory mechanisms to be in place in a manner that they are accountable. Nobody likes accountability, and everyone loves control. So they are in a comfortable place. Why would they give it up? Saiji is back.
Yes, Sai Deepak, let me bring you to the picture now. So you heard both the panelists before you, and we understand the crux of the issue. Let's hear your thoughts on this issue as well.
I think I was interrupted by some kind of an international conspiracy. So I'll come to the point straight. So, the backdrop of this bill, of course, is the Sri Krishna Committee report. And I think there are three fantastic highlights of this particular report which have been captured in the bill. First, as Jitin explained, the concept of a fiduciary. And the significance of that particular concept obviously is that notwithstanding the unilateral contractual terms that are imposed by any of these entities, as long as the role that they perform is in the range of a data principle or a fiduciary relationship, which has a certain element of trust, then they are bound by the provisions of this particular bill. So I think that's a fantastic extension of the concept of a data principle. That's one. Second is the committee as well as the bill. They try to strike a balance between recognition that there is, of course, the concept of an international flow of data, but that doesn't necessarily mean cession of national interest or, let's say, national sovereignty with respect to the data. So that, I think, is the balance that is being struck. The only thing that I would certainly disagree with, both with the report and certain references in academic conferences about data being just goods and being compared with physical goods, is that it's not possible for us to prognosticate the value of information and the sensitivity and the criticality that it could ultimately lead to. So therefore, its comparison to plain and simple goods and its comparison to plain and simple international transaction and physical goods, I think, is a reductionist approach. So the information that data as an intangible and as an unpredictable variable represents is something that we must be very, very cognizant of. Three, as someone who certainly places a lot of premium on national interest, I don't see the point in India being relegated to the status of merely a market without having a say on how it is treated by any of these people. At the end of the day, I can't be, let's say, a certain party who provides access to such a huge market. At the end of the day, do they need us or do we need them is the simple question. The fact is, I don't think anybody can ignore India anymore, no matter what the situation, what the circumstances, and what the downturn in the economy or whatever it may be. As far as I'm concerned, our demographics and our population represents a huge, huge opportunity. So if not Google or if not Facebook, there will always be somebody else to step into the picture. So it's for them to listen to us. And I don't think the expectations that India puts forth across the table through the means of this particular bill is unreasonable. What is it that India is ultimately saying? India is primarily saying that let us strike a distinction between data and personal data. And let us also give a certain amount of say to the people who are the recipient of your services and you're the beneficiary of their information. Three, if ultimately you wish to operate in this particular country, notwithstanding the fact that the business in which you deal with is information related business, you cannot say that we have zero sovereignty over storage related aspects or processing related aspects. I don't see which of these propositions or positions fails to pass muster on the annals of reasonableness. These are very reasonable propositions. So if there is an Indian organization or a trade body that ultimately chooses to shill for these organizations, I'm sorry, I pity them for their myopia, and I hope that they grow a spine, they grow a vertebracy, and they grow an independent mind of their own. And they also have a certain degree of foresight in recognizing that their interests always lies with the national interest and not against it.
You know, Jitin Jain, since we are here, let's talk about this aspect as well. So would you also agree that we will be going in from a position of strength? Does this also give our homegrown companies an opportunity to come to the fore and deliver if at any point in time someone backs off? We've seen that happening with Coup as well recently, but it's still not taken up or taken off the way we would have liked it to. So is this an opportunity as well? And do we come from a position of strength?
You see, Frank, we have to understand what is our position, and then we can decide whether we have a position of strength or we are, negotiating from a position of weakness. You see, now, if you look at 5 major controversies of last 2 years, and let's put example of what we've discussed on your shows on Rajya Sabha TV. You had example of Cambridge Analytica. Were we able to do anything? Our people went to Supreme Court. They said that we do not have extraterritorial jurisdiction. Did Facebook do anything? They lied. They gave 3 different versions in 3 different countries. They said something else in Singapore. They said something else in UK. They said something else in America. And when the Singapore people asked that you can't be speaking 3 different things in 3 different jurisdictions, the answer was that we cannot tell you or we cannot comment on what we said in a different country. But you see their conduct across different jurisdictions, their replies across in different countries reflect their state of mind and what they think about the value of our data. So we could not do anything on Cambridge Analytica. Then there was a question of this, misinformation being spread across India, hashtag campaigns being run from Pakistan, hashtag campaigns run during Corona. And what happened during the farmer rights, when you issue a notice to Twitter, again, some chap sitting in the US will decide whether they want to accede to your request or not. And then you are dependent on them because there is no data in India. And since the data is in US, there are subsidiaries of marketing office which are situated in Gurgaon or Hyderabad. They say that, look, we are only a marketing office. The decision makers, the data, and the entire mechanism lies in US. So either you go through MLAT or you send a letter regulatory or you just wait for their response. So you are left at their mercy. Third, see, any sort of espionage or misinformation or crime or you say, or what is happening with WhatsApp when they are running, forcing upon a different policy on you, treating you as a third-world citizens when they have a different standard in US and Europe. The crux of all the debates at the end of the day comes is that, look, we do not have a data privacy bill in India, what we can do. If we had a data privacy bill, government will have teeth and they will be able to deal with these monsters the way they are imposing their terms and conditions on us. So I think the data privacy bill is very, very necessary. And that is the very reason that what Facebook is doing or what WhatsApp is doing, they are trying to do it before the data privacy bill comes so that, they could say that, oh, we did before it, now it is all done and forgotten. There can't be done much. And second policy, what they're deploying is that if you can't convince, start confusing. So if you look at last 3 years of all the conferences which have taken place on this data privacy bill, all the papers which have been published, bearing few nationalists who have kept national interest above everyone. I would say 85% of conferences and paper were all funded directly or indirectly by Facebook and Google. You can go and check their fundings, you can check their sponsorships, letters, terms and conditions which say. And what is the idea being propagated? Oh, we should have a global free flow of data on internet. We should not have splinter internet. We are not China or Russia. What is global free flow of data? That an Indian sending a message to Delhi from Bombay should first go to US, then come back to Mumbai. This is global free flow of data. And then if somebody wakes up and say that, look, why don't you, we are the biggest smartphone and internet population in the world. Why don't we even have a single ICANN server in India? Why does Indian internet traffic has to go to Europe has to go from Pakistan? Oh, really? We will keep a server in India. And then you deal with some non-technical babus and you know what they're proposing you? We will keep a mirror copy, which is useless. As Sai rightly pointed out, that data cannot be compared to physical goods. Why WhatsApp had to delay for 1.5 years? Because when RBI said that you have to keep data in India, what WhatsApp was trying to tell RBI is that, okay, we will comply with your condition, we'll keep a copy of data. See, we have to very well understand that data has to reside in India. There should not be a copy, it should be an exclusive copy. You cannot take out anything out of India without the exclusive consent, explicit consent of RBI or of Indian users. And this is the whole game, that they're trying to find loopholes, that we will comply with your condition with some loopholes so that we can have a copy of your data in US. Once they have a copy, then your whole purpose of having a data localization or data jurisdiction is defeated. So I think these are fine prints. We have to be very, very careful, and we have to ensure that we don't fall for this propaganda. Third interesting thing I want to tell you, Frank, that you see, which country will not want the data of its users to be located in their own country? Which country will oppose that? You know, if at all there has to be any money or monetary worth which has to be made out of the data of this country, it should be made in India, and we should pay taxes to our government instead of a foreign government. Twitter paid 15 lakh rupees last year. Now YouTube is saying that if an Indian produces any YouTube video in India, we will charge taxes in US. But if you apply a reverse logic that why are you not paying any taxes in India for ads shown to Indian users? No, we will pay in US. So I think we have to see through this propaganda that whatever we are taught or whatever we are tutored, that global free flow of data, open internet, these are all facades, these are all smoke screens to ensure that we are not able to localize our data. And since they are not able to do this, now they have found this devious way of funding NGOs, the Greenpeace model which used to happen, that you organize conferences, seminars, publish papers, put out comparisons. Frank, you would know how many comparisons, how many channels ran a comparison of Coup and Twitter on their channels. Can you compare a 3-month-old toddler to a 24-year-old youngsters? And then you want to compare features. And you very well know how and same comparisons were run on every channel. And you very well know that how where those comparisons would have been made, who would have funded them, and who were speaking. So I agree with Sai and Aishwarya that we have to be extremely careful that this is an issue of national importance. We are looking at the dawn of digital age. And you see, every country is in a crunch of money today. Economies are collapsing. If there is a way to generate additional 40,000-50,000 crores every year through digital taxation or data localization or Indian data centers, we must go for it. And there cannot be any other way. And this government, which has been trying to do a course correction in last 3 years by banning Chinese apps, by localizing data, by banning Chinese hardware in telecom sector, giving telecom security directives, I think these decisive moves will make the future and destiny of India.
Absolutely. Jai Sai Deepak, let me come back to you for another comment. Let's talk about another aspect completely. There are concerns that the bill gives the government blanket powers, to access citizens' data. Are these concerns justified?
I think these concerns will have to be understood in the backdrop of who is airing these concerns and who is actually using whom as mouthpieces for these concerns. And I understand, based on my limited exposure with these groups and having perhaps even advised them at some point with respect to intermediate policy, that by and large, some of these concerns are broadly wondering if there is a departure from certain positions that have been established through the Shreya Singhal judgment. Okay, Maybe they're trying to, let's say, extrapolate these positions based on what I've understood from some of these concerns. But I think the position has largely changed from the time of the passing of the Shreya Singhal judgment, and the nature of concerns that the Indian government is trying to grapple with is very, very different from, let's say, a straight and simple Section 66A situation. Okay, it has gone much beyond it. We are looking at perhaps a double beta version of these situations. So I don't believe that some concerns are valid. And see, it's always possible for certain academic positions to be taken, but we live in the real world. And we have to understand how is it that India can do justice to three different concerns. One, I would say that generation of revenue from this particular, let's say, port of revenue is something that could be at the bottom of the list of priorities. But the first issue is with respect to privacy. The second is with respect to, are you giving rise to a different kind of a military industrial complex wherein this particular, let's say, segment plays a crucial role in information. That's a relevant. Three is, what is it that these, let's say, these entities ultimately aim for? Because I don't believe all these entities are necessarily private entities. Gone are the days when we can actually give them that particular benefit. If we are willing to assume that certain telecom industries which come from, let's say, China, or perhaps the representatives of a different organization altogether, I don't see why is it that we're unwilling to extend the same logic to American entities. After all, it is the mother of, let's say, the military industrial complex, so to speak, in world's history. So these are certain aspects that we have to certainly bear in mind. Gone are the times when I used to approach some of these issues with, let's say, a certain degree of naivety from a legal and constitutional perspective. A very different game altogether. I'm open to all those aspects. I'm open to all those considerations and factors.
All right, time to get quick closing comments now from all my panelists with the best way forward, starting first with you, Aishwarya Bhati.
Well, I do also want to, comment on the question that you put to Saiji, because, this is a boogie that is being raised a lot, that government is going to have control. Government is going to, misuse the data, and it will have clandestine access to data. I think what needs to be understood, I mentioned it briefly earlier also, that the grounds on which the state can access data is in the interest of security of state, public order, sovereignty, integrity, friendly relations, etc. And if you read the provisos, to Article 19, so we forget that there is anything beyond Article 19.1. There is Article 19.2, 3, 4, 5. They have these conditions, so those freedoms can be curtailed in the constitutional mechanism for the very same grounds. But importantly, India is a country of rule of law. Saiji mentioned Shreya Singhal's judgment. Very clearly, very categoric parameters have been laid down, and it's not like, government is not accountable or answerable here. I think the smoke screen is being created only for the purpose, again, of vested interest. It's like their control is going. So they are trying every mechanism that is available. Some of this is a fair means, unfair means, everything, because they are not governments. They are not accountable. They are not accountable in the same manner that governments are. So rule of law mechanism is strongly in place in India. One does not need to worry about, of course, governments are going to act arbitrarily. Executive does that. But the rule of law regime ensures that, that rule of law prevails. So the purpose of this is to bring the large commercial entities in line. And this, again, saying that free flow of data in India, trying to do this, I will recommend you to have a look at the European regulation, Brazilian regulation. Australia is relooking. Singapore, one of the best practices, and this is not China, Russia. California, US has so far shunned it for the reason that everything, anyways, US has been the big brother. But now they are also realizing that some of these corporations are getting bigger than the sovereign states itself. So if you do analysis or a comparison of regimes across the world, you'll see that the best practices in the world are along the same line, and this is the absolute imperative of the time.
Jitin Jain, very quickly, closing comments from you.
I think on this issue, I have a little different opinion from what Aishwarya ji said. I think, you see, if you look at countries like US, UK, Australia, or any other robust democracy in the world, which have got good surveillance capabilities, and or where these organizations are based, governments do collect data. Government do access data, be it US NSA or UK's MI5 or NCSC. So every democracy does that. So this argument that government should not access data at all and users should have a privacy, and this is a smoke screen. Obviously, I agree. But yes, there is one difference in other countries and us. One that, for somehow in last 30, 40, 50 years, our institutions have been politicized. Nowhere, if you look at history of 40 years in the US and UK, no political parties ever raised a question on the integrity of UK's MI6, MI5 or CIA there, or US NSA, across political spectrum. They understand that institutions will do what is good for the country. Here in India, every successive government in every state or center has accused opposition party or opposition party has accused the government in power of misusing the government institutions or investigative agencies. So I think because of whatever reasons, this the issue of integrity or issue of our institution or the masters bending to the wills of their political master, I think it will be good to have a oversight mechanism. It could be in the form of judicial oversight, it could be in the form of political oversight, or it could be formed in the mix of judicial plus citizenry oversight. But government must have access to data. Government must have access to entire data to deal with law enforcement situations, to deal with terrorism, to deal with espionage. There is no doubt about it. And those who are raising a bogey about government collecting data are the ones who go happily in US embassy, give 5 Tinder fingerprints, applying for visa, and then post a photo. So I think if you can give your data to foreign government, foreign companies, I think gone are those days. Every government in the world will collect data of its citizens. So that is a settled issue. Only issue is that can we have some sort of regulatory or oversight mechanism? In my opinion, yes, in India at least, we must have a very strong oversight mechanism so that if there is something, someone has gone beyond the line, or say if someone has mishandled something or because of political pressure or whatever, he can be made accountable and he can be brought to book. But beyond that, I think this bill is absolutely, it may have certain flaws, but we can improve upon with time. This bill will do a great service to India's digital future.
And Jay Sai Deepak, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
I just have 2 points. See, it's surprising that those people who had a problem with the Aadhaar mechanism in the first place, saying we can't hand over such data to government because we don't know what the government will do and all of that, are now batting for private entities having complete monopoly over private data and personal data. And we are being told that the kind of remedies that we have against the government must at least be available to some extent against private parties. I think someone's speaking from 2 sides of their mouth. This is an extremely Janusian position, according to me. So at the end of the day, at least with respect to the government, you have writ remedies. What remedies do you have against a biggie? From jurisdiction to actual disputes, there is really nothing that you can do against the private entity. So I think this particular legislation certainly arms people to a significant extent to have legal remedies that they can have at their disposal against these entities. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is, I think for several years now, our Métis and Deities have been significantly under pressure under several dispensations, thanks to certain organizations which have fronted as, let's say, free speech groups, okay, and privacy groups, so to speak. For the first time, I think our departments and our ministries are actually standing up to these lobbies and telling them, we understand and we can also speak in the same language. And if it's a question of constitutional patriotism, we are happy to play within the framework of the constitution, and let's see where this actually goes. And that, I think, is why it has actually disheartened quite a few people, because their ability to browbeat Indian governments has perhaps gone for a toss and out of the park. So maybe these are the 2 aspects. So let's hope that the government doesn't buckle and they continue to, look them squarely in the eye and represent national interest and protect national interest.
All right. On that note, then, I'll call it a wrap on this edition of Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. What's coming out of this discussion is that the bill is a step in the right direction. It is in our interest to ensure that Indian data is stored on Indian shores. The MNCs are against it as they don't want to abide by the law of the land. Just like how Australia has gone after the tech giants, we too should ensure that we don't give them a free hand. Concerns that the bill gives the government blanket powers to access citizens' data are not justified, as there are sufficient safeguards in the bill. We have to push for these reforms because it is in everyone's best interest. Once again, thank you for your continued support. For those of you who haven't already subscribed, please like the video first, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and then all notifications. Do follow our social media handles for all the latest updates, and you can also subscribe to our newsletter to get some incisive content. The Bharata First team is running a daily quiz. The winner will get to interview me in a program called Hot Seat that airs at 6 p.m. on Saturdays. Details are in the description of this video. Here are the UPI IDs for those who would like to contribute. They are also in the description of this video. A small contribution you make will go a big way in ensuring that we keep bringing you this content. Do continue to show your love and support. That's it from me. See you again next time.